Yeah, so I'm just going to talk briefly about a project that I'm working on with Ciarán O'Sullivan in Tallaght and Damien Cox in Blanchardstown. And just to set the scene really for the project, I guess there's some of you may know and some of you may not know that there's 3 institutes of technology in Dublin that intend to merge within the next year to form a single entity. And then in the next 2 to 3 years, it's anticipated that we'll apply for university status to become the technological university for Dublin. And myself and Ciarán and Damien, it's important to us, or we think it's important at least, that the mass learning support that's offered in these institutes, that as they evolve into this merged entity, that it evolves too, and you know that the support that's given to the students remains to be the best that it can be in the new university. And I guess this project really is kind of the first step along that process. So what we did, we thought it'd be a sensible place to start to see exactly what the math support services are in each of the 3 institutes. And then following on from that, we decided to survey staff and students across the 3 institutes just to try to identify, or at least the first step to identify what the needs for math support would be in each of them, which are in common and which are different and so on. And we decided to survey staff who teach on mathematically or statistically related modules, and then students who had previously engaged with some form of maths learning support, just because they were the easiest to reach because we had all their contact details, basically. Following on from that survey, we decided to trial a virtual drop-in service, and it's trying to hurry me up. And today I'm just going to talk about the survey and the trial of the drop-in service. So in the survey, we asked 2 main questions. We asked staff and students, in their opinion, what are the 3 main topics the students would require support for? And then we asked them their preference for how this support would be delivered. So on a 5-point scale ranging from exclusively online provision to a mix, or mostly online, some in person, to an equal mix, to mostly in person, some online, and then to exclusively in person. The responses to the question 1 on the topics, we got quite a variety of responses, but we decided to put them into 5 categories just to make things a bit simpler. So the categories we chose were basic algebra, logs and indices and transposition of formulae, say calculus preliminaries, by which you mean fractions, numeracy and percentages and so on, probability and statistics, and then everything else we lumped into the other category. Examples of things that fell in there were discrete mathematics, or Fourier transforms, or Laplace transforms, or computational physics, or whatever. You know, you got quite a lot of responses. We got a total across the 3 institutes of 45 staff responses, which I thought it's okay, because I'd imagine there probably isn't more than 70, maybe 80 staff members across the 3 teaching maths and statistics. So it's a decent response rate for an online survey. And the most common topic chosen by staff was basic algebra, followed by calculus, then closely followed by preliminaries, the others category, and probability and statistics. So again, that's what the staff would think students would need support with. And for the preference, the majority of them, about 65%, said that their preference would be that maths learning support would be delivered mostly in person, but with some form of online provision. Nobody said exclusively online, and you can see that a certain amount of them said an equal mix and exclusively in person, and so on. If we break it down per institute, so the Dublin Institute of Technology, the most common topic would have been calculus, closely followed by algebra. For Blanchardstown, staff thought that basic algebra would be the most common topic that students would need help with, and in Tallaght it was the preliminaries. And the preferences, the DIT and Tallaght are mostly in line with each other, and Blanchardstown there seems to be a shift towards more of an online provision than there would be in the other 2 institutes. And I'll talk a bit more about the reason for that, or why we think that is the case in a while. For students, we got 115 responses, which is a pretty awful response rate considering the amount of students who you would think across the 3 institutes who would have engaged in math support. But that's what happens. I think you were talking, Chelsea, about how hard it is to get people to engage in online surveys, especially students. They have a lot of other things to be worrying about. But they decided that across the 3 institutes that calculus was the most common topic, followed by the others category, which maybe suggests another categorization is needed for students, but for comparison, it's good to keep the same categories. then probability and statistics, and algebra, with preliminaries interestingly coming in as the thing that they think they the least need help with. And the preference kind of in line with the staff, 50% of them mostly in person, a significant amount of them saying exclusively in person and equal online and in person. Again, breaking it down per institute. This time, Blanchardstown and DIT seem to have the same first preference in calculus. And in Tala, the others category came in number 1. And preferences, again, pretty in line with that shift towards the online in ITB. If you compare the staff and the student responses, which is the most interesting comparison, is you can see that there's quite a difference. The students seem to think that calculus is the thing that they need to support with the most, but for staff, it's basic algebra, and that kind of ties in with my own anecdotal experience and talking to other people, that you say if a student comes into the Math Support Centre with a calculus problem, and therefore they think that they need help with calculus, but when you sit down next to them, it's transposition of formula they need, or it's indices that they're struggling with. So it's that really kind of disconnect almost. But the preferences for how the support will be delivered there's no real significant difference between them, except you can see that students have more of a preference than staff for exclusive online provision, or sorry, exclusive in-person provision. Yeah. So in terms of implications for maths learning support provision, or at least I guess the conclusions of the survey, it's quite reassuring that the majority of staff and students would like to see the maths learning support provided primarily in person. But there is a preference that some form of that would be given online, so I guess our support should reflect that. In Blanchardstown, why does it keep doing that? In Blanchardstown, there appears to be a greater preference for the online provision than the other 2 institutes, and we believe that is the case because in Blanchardstown they actually offer some courses completely online. So the staff and students are more familiar with that form of delivery, and therefore, the things you're more familiar with, you tend to fear less. There's quite a variation, or there's some variation in the topics between the 3 institutes, as you would expect. DIT tends to offer more level A courses than Blanchardstown and Tala, and they would have their own specialisation. So the support offered in this new merged entity should not be so homogeneous. It should be reflecting the differences in the 3 campuses. So I guess moving on to the last part, based upon the preference that staff and students had, that most of it would be given, or some form of support would be given online, we decided to just try a virtual drop-in service, with the idea that if this is successful, that would ever only be supplementary to the in-person provision, but it's just something else, some other form of service. To do this, we received seed funding from the DIT Learning, Teaching and Technology Centre to purchase 3 tablets, and we went for the Wacom Intuos tablets. I think that was Madonna was mentioning. Yeah, you've used those before? Yeah. The reason I went for it is that a colleague of mine in DIT had used them for a similar project, and she allowed me to play around with them, and Kieran as well. And I quite like them. When you write on it, there's a bit of resistance. It's kind of like writing on a page file. If you write on a glass tablet, sometimes it feels quite artificial. I just put an A4 page next to it there, so you can see to get an idea of the size of it. So it's a reasonably sized tablet. It hooks up to your laptop, and then you use either some form of paint or whatever to write on and capture it. In fact, what we actually decided to use Adobe Connect video conferencing technology. The reason we decided to use that is because we had license for it in Blanchardstown and Tala, and I was able to get an extra license in DIT. And it's just so the idea is that it's a shared whiteboard. You write on the tablet. What you write on the tablet comes up on the whiteboard, and everybody sees it, and everybody can write on that whiteboard. You can, if you wanted, you can use different pens to show the different people who are writing. You have a microphone so everybody hears what everyone is saying. You have a pointer. This guy here, if you click that, it allows you to point at certain objects if you want to point to highlight certain issues. If you have more than 1 people involved, you can have this hand up function. So if they want to get your attention, they can use that. and you can, another good feature is that you can actually take a screencast or a picture of each whiteboard page and email that to the students so they have that afterwards. For the trial, we decided to just have an initial trial between myself, Kieran and Damien in Blanchardstown, just to try to iron out any technical issues that may arise, just how to actually use the software, how to use the tablets. And then following on that, our first real trial, and we intend to have a few more hopefully, involved 5 students from Tala and a staff member from DIT, which was me. On the other end, so each student posed a question, which they just posed it by writing it on the shared whiteboard in turn, and then I answered the question for them on the same whiteboard. The whole trial lasted 45 minutes, but a lot of that time, despite our previous trial, was spent wrestling with connection issues, with the sound issues, and so on. So it was quite frustrating, to be honest, for myself and for the students, but I guess it was the first trial. The students were good enough to give us feedback, and quite detailed feedback, so I'm just going to talk through that for a few minutes. Overall impression from the students, I think this is actually an older version of, there was a few more overall impressions that I had that I meant to show you. But anyway, the overall impression from students was that it was a great idea and it has potential, and they'd like to see something like it implemented, but unless it became, you know, more streamlined and there wasn't such issues with the sound and the connection, that it might actually just be more frustrating than useful. But as I say, they were positive towards the idea of it. We asked them what, and again, this is only one trial with 5 students, so you know, can't draw huge conclusions from it, but we asked them what they thought the advantages of the virtual drop-in over the in-person drop-in. They mentioned that it would help people to learn or ask questions easier who are shy or ashamed to do so in class. I think that's maybe in reference to drop-in versus in class, but if you can also apply it to virtual drop-in versus in-person drop-in, because you still know who the person is when they're sitting next to you, and they might still be a little bit shy about asking questions. But if you remove that completely and it's anonymous, then they might ask some questions they wouldn't do otherwise. They spoke about the larger scope of time and geographical location. I guess what I take from that is, say if there's students in Tala and they can't make the Tala in-person drop-in, but there is a time in DIT that would suit them, and the virtual drop-in service is available at the time, then it opens it up more for them, and the geographical location, because you don't necessarily have to be physically in the drop-in. Obviously, you can be anywhere. The disadvantages, one student said, if the lecturer on the virtual drop-in uses a different technique to solve the questions in the classroom lecture, it may be confusing and take longer to help solve a problem, and that actually happened in the trial. I approached the problem differently than the way Kieran had taught his students, and I won't say which way was right, but they're both right, of course. And so that that would almost could have a negative effect, really. Another student said it may get overloaded with students who don't bother going to class, as they see the system as a substitute for class attendance. That also applies to the in-person drop-in, really. So I don't really know if that's, maybe again the anonymity makes it a bit easier to get away with it online. We asked them for some recommendations on how to improve it. The first one is pretty obvious and something we should have thought of. There's quite an echo effect when we were just using the laptop speakers and the laptop microphone, and there's a bit of feedback. So get a microphone and speakers or headphones to eliminate that effect. Another student suggested, rather than they write their questions on the shared whiteboard, that they could have them prepared and scan them in, and somehow that comes up on my screen, and then I can annotate it and write on it, and we can write on it together. That's a good idea. Another student suggested that if you had a webcam on either side facing a whiteboard, that's an interesting idea. It's not exactly, you're not sharing the whiteboard, but it was an interesting idea. The last one is something I thought was quite interesting. Kind of like I guess the Facebook platform that you have, Shazia, is that somewhere they can post a question, possibly by a video, and within a day or two they will get it, or within whatever amount of time you just think is realistic, they will get an answer via video that they can then download, and then perhaps these could be shared as open resources then. I thought that was quite interesting. And that was it. As I said, it was just really a very initial trial. We only done it with 5 students. Hope to do it with a few more students over the next few weeks before the summer break, and maybe have it in some form that we can roll it out on a wider basis come September. Okay, thanks for listening.